Happy Wednesday and welcome back to the Wolf Den presented by Win Again Academy. I'm Matt Wolff, founder and CEO of Ticket Time Machine. Today we welcome Beau Gunderson to the Wolf Den. How's everything going, Beau?
Good, good. How are you doing?
Doing great. Yeah, glad to have you here. We're going to talk a lot about NFTs and crypto, but for those in the audience who don't know who you are, tell us a quick background.
Yeah, so um, not a ton of professional experience related to NFTs or crypto. I'm a software engineer by trade for the last I guess it's been 20 years now. Um, Currently CTO of a healthcare startup, and that takes up a lot of my time.
Tell us about the startup. Let's give them a little plug here.
Yeah, Canvas Medical. We build electronic health record software for primary care practices. Um, Currently working on more of a platform push in terms of early stage healthcare technology startups who need an EHR and who want one that they can integrate with. So that's what we're building.
How competitive is that market right now?
Um, there are a couple of new players. We have some lead time on that specific niche. Um, the EHR market in general, pretty dang competitive. But the niche we're kind of trying to serve, not a ton of competition yet. Though there's a large player has just entered that space.
As it always is, right? What was your background? How did you get into being a software programmer and getting into
Yeah. So I didn't go to school. What I did was found the computer at an early age and figured out that in terms of escapism, it's hard to beat the computer. So I read a lot of books as a kid, and I played on the computer a lot as a kid. Eventually figured out that I could build things, um, and started to learn programming, and then kind of got my first programming job. I think I must have been 16, and have just been doing that ever since. And that's maybe an unconventional way to get to where I am, but it worked for me.
Yeah. So when you say didn't go to school, you mean you didn't go to school at all, not that you didn't just go to school for that. You skipped college and went right
Yeah,
to.
skipped college entirely. The only post high school classes I have are in glassworking, which I thought I was going to do for a while, and then never took that anywhere.
And that's not an easy thing to get into without you know education and learning. I guess a lot of things you can self teach, but that's not an easy thing to do. Programming. Um,
Yeah, programming is um, they teach you in school. They teach you a lot of theory and a lot of things that you may not use in your day to day. So it is something that you can pick up if you are determined to do so, and the more concrete a goal you have in mind, the easier it is, because you'll learn everything you need to do in order to achieve what you're building, essentially. So if you pick an achievable goal, um, picking up just the pieces required to get to that is that's usually how I learn, and how I suggest people starting out start to learn, is just to pick something you're building and then learn exactly the pieces you need to build that.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess a lot of things in college, as you mentioned, learning stuff that it's not going to be applicable in the real world. So when you just dive in and trial and error and figure it out, that could be a good way to go for a lot of things. Um, what's the biggest difference now with programming and the computer world than back then? Obviously, it's light years, um, but from a
Yeah, a
pro
lot of
point of view.
yeah, a lot of the tooling is a lot better. There's a lot of things that we can do now in terms of debugging programs, or in terms of documentation, or auto completion, and so like the tooling is way better. I don't know if that necessarily changes how productive I am. Um, just because like things are more complicated now as well. So to support the more complicated nature of what we're doing, the tools had to be better. So like I remember back when like, you know, I was writing code in like Notepad or whatever like DOS based like editor I was using, and you know, having a whole game in one file and compiling that, and it would take, you know, the computer would chug for a minute and spit something out. Versus now, where you have like just layers on layers of tooling just to kind of spit out your hello world example. So it's the complication has increased exponentially from kind of when I started. Um, some of it has been helpful, and some of it I think serves to confuse newcomers.
Yeah, I think there's so many updates to things that it's like nobody asked for this. This isn't helping anything,
Yeah,
but they continue to do it. Versions and new versions. Assume money is why is the big driver of that. What were the sort of the games and applications that you were using back when you first started, and what are you into today?
um, man, I loved. I did play games when I was younger on the computer. I think if you want to go way back, uh, King's Quest by Sierra and Space Quest, love those games. And then later on, Doom and Quake and all that fun stuff. What was I? What else? Oh, like I spent a ton of time on IRC. So this was back in like 98, 99 when I started hanging out on IRC, which is Internet Relay Chat. It's like just straight up text-based chat, um, divided up into channels. And um, I was calling up BBSs locally. Um, this is like just right pre-internet, where if you wanted to talk to people online, you had to dial a BBS in your area, and it could hold like, you know, two people could connect to it at once, right? So you could talk to the one other person online in real time, or you could post messages to a forum, and it was all text based. And there was a style of art called ANSI art, which is just like colored blocks on a screen, and usually screens were like 80 by 25 characters, so there's not a ton of detail, but people would make these like super long like scrolling ones, and at modem speed they would like you could like see them scroll slowly up as they would load. So when I got on IRC, one of the channels I hung out in was called ANSI, and it was all the people that made that style of art for BBSs and whatnot. And that actually launched my career because I found a guy in there who was he, you know, started out young as an ANSI artist, and then went to art school and learned 3D art, and became a visual effects artist at a spot called Zoic. And he found out I could program, and he was asking me all sorts of things about how he could automate his 3D workflows. And I wrote him some simple scripts, and he was like, "Man, you should do this professionally." And I was like, I don't know how old I was. I was like maybe 21 then,
Okay.
and just working lots of crappy jobs. And he, I was like, you know, you're my only contact in this field. So if something comes up, let me know. But otherwise, probably not going to end up working in visual effects. And their systems engineer quit, and he was like, "Yo, send these guys your resume," and flew down for an interview, which was in LA, and an earthquake happened during my interview.
Wow.
But I got the job, worked there for a year and a half, and that really kind of started my actual career. Um, and yeah, it was a good job, fun people, but the film industry is like burnout central. So I only lasted a year and a half there because I was like, you know, sleeping in the editing bay at work, and just too many hours.
Yeah, that's common out there, I think,
Yeah,
from what I
yeah.
hear.
Yeah,
So,
well, they had like legally they have the film industry has special dispensation that standard working hours are 50 hours a week. You don't get overtime until after 50.
oh, wow.
So yeah,
That's a lot. Sometimes you don't get overtime at all here, and depending on
mm,
what kind of job you have now and what you're working.
yeah,
So I guess overtime at 50 isn't bad. It all depends, right?
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so let's fast forward to today. What are you into on the computer wise, and talk a little bit about your experience with NFTs and crypto. I want people to learn a little bit. I've heard you guys talk during our poker games. That's how I met
yeah,
Beau, poker games, and you guys have a lot of knowledge and seems like some hands-on experience. So first of all, let's tell people what is an NFT, because it's a lot of people don't understand it. Exactly what it is, and then kind of trying to
yeah,
figure out why should we care.
yeah. So stands for non-fungible token, and the token part comes from um, uh, these what they call ERC20 tokens, which kind of predate NFTs and which are essentially like units of money on the blockchain, specifically the Ethereum blockchain. And so, like USDC is an example of an ERC20 token, which is fungible, right? Like it's just you're sending dollars back and forth. USDC is a stable coin which is pegged to the US dollar, that Coinbase runs, I believe. But that's where the token and non-fungible token comes from. NFTs are like the not fungible part comes from, like, if you're sending dollars back and forth, you're just increasing or decreasing the dollars in your wallet, and they're fungible, right? Nobody's tracking the specific dollars. NFTs are not fungible, meaning um, they're all different. They're all unique, or even if they all have the same traits, meaning they're not like you couldn't tell them apart if you looked. They still have a specific ID, whereby I'm sending a specific NFT to you or receiving one from you. Um, so that's where that non fungible came from. It's such a like technical name for something that a lot of people aren't treating very technically. And I think my my primary interest is just in kind of understanding um, the social dynamics, the community dynamics. I built some forensic tools. Um, there are a couple of games that I've looked at pretty in depth, um, and I'm not super um, positive on NFTs. There's a lot of speculation. There's a lot of grifting and scamming. There's an environmental cost, depending on which technology is used. And
Is it a lot
culturally,
different
there's
than mining? The environmental side is the mining for Bitcoin. Is that a similar?
well, like that's mining for Bitcoin, mining for Ethereum, very similar. And both like so if you're trading NFTs back and forth on Ethereum, uh, what what actually causes those transactions to get sealed into the chain is somebody mining, right? So that kind of the activity of mining kind of backs all of that activity by um, hashing and sealing it into the chain. So uh, if you use a technology like Polygon, which is a side chain to Ethereum, um, it does not use what's called proof of work. And so there's not all of that mining backing that activity. So there are some people who kind of, uh, for several reasons, decide I'm not going to transact on mainnet. I'm going to do all of my transactions on an alternate technology. And there are several. Polygon is one of the most popular just because it's as close to mainnet as you can be. And the main difference is that it's not proof of work. Um, it's an alternate method for getting those transactions sealed onto the chain.
And so that's the people who say we want to not hurt the environment as much.
There's also a monetary component because if you're transacting on mainnet, gas fees are a lot of money, and on Polygon, they're like fractions of a cent. So for that reason, I think people like it. So you get the kind of 1-2 of like I can feel a little better about not having to have all of these miners to do whatever I need to do, and you're also paying 1,000th or less of the cost as if you were making transactions on mainnet. Now, it's not a panacea in terms of you still might have to transact on mainnet to get your funds to Polygon, right? So it's hard to not be complicit to some extent. Though, of course, Ethereum mainnet, there are I think the goalposts keep moving a little bit, but there's this idea that mainnet will move to proof of stake from proof of work, which is, of course, a little bit of a thorny issue for the miners themselves who have invested all this money into their compute infrastructure for mining. And now Ethereum is kind of saying, we would like to move away from that. So,
but in the NFT world, how many people are experts who really understand it and know what's going on?
Not a ton. And I think there are people who are great at trading and who, and I would kind of compare them to people who do well in the stock market. They may not have any special technical knowledge. They may have come up with their own indicators in terms of looking at volumes of buying and selling and kind of social media patterns. They may have the copy trading is pretty can work well for you if you find a whale who consistently does well and just copy their trades. People have made money that way. But like if you there are people who are like doing this full time, right? Just flipping NFTs and doing really well. Which like that's fascinating to me. Like I'm not sure it's hard to imagine that they're providing a ton of benefit to the world. But when money is involved, I'm interested because it changes dynamics quite a bit. And especially when you kind of layer on this interesting community dynamic whereby all of these people are friends, they hang out in the same discords, they hang out on Twitter together, and everybody's trying to kind of profit off each other by having information asymmetry. So it's like a really interesting dynamic, and like I'm interested in that. But I'm not it's like I have all of this knowledge about all of this stuff, just from paying attention, but not, like I said, not super positive on it.
Yeah, I mean, everyone, music, entertainment, sports, art. I mean, it's everyone is releasing an NFT. That's the big thing is we're going to release an NFT, but
Yeah, I
most
mean it's like a total trend, right? And I have many friends on my Twitter who like will just write a company off as soon as they dive into NFTs because they're so kind of anti crypto because of the environmental issues. And so like I've like Nike and Pepsi both just got in and like they're getting boycotted by a large section of people, even as people who are into NFTs are kind of heralding it as either, oh, it's mainstream now, or like, oh God, this is the top. Everybody get out.
yeah, it's got to be one or the other. It's got to be this thing's going to go nuts and it's got to level off at some point, but it could stay up at the top or it could completely bust. I don't know. Part of the feeling that, and I don't know a whole lot. This is just my understanding. If the crypto isn't regulated, then it's just more like you said, playing the stock market, speculation, just people
Mhm.
playing with money, maybe that they don't have because they think it's going to be the next big thing. The rich get richer,
Yeah.
right? NFTs in a lot of sense are unaffordable to the average person. It's
Yeah.
it's crazy,
Yep.
the amount of money that these things are going for when it's, I don't know what, it's like art, anything, it's whatever someone will pay for it.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what something's worth. And then if you hold on to it, sure, that's great. If you want to have something to hold on, I have plenty of things I hold on to. They're worth a lot more to me than they would be on the
Yeah.
open market, but I'm not worried about what their actual worth is.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so I don't know. It's hard to tell. What do you think what would it look like if this thing just does take off? What would have to happen for this to become, I don't want to say legitimate because there's some legitimacy to it currently,
Hmm.
but for
Hmm.
this to be the next big thing?
I don't know. I mean, in some ways, it's a big thing already with the amount of money and the amount of people involved. Um, like Ubisoft, maker of games, just announced that they're going to do some of their DLC as NFTs. And some people were ecstatic about it, and some people were like, "I'm never going to buy another Ubisoft game." Um, and it has that polarizing effect. But it these companies keep like like whoever their trend forecasters are like, this is like, we should get in on this. It has that aura of um, newness to it. And I think a lot of people are kind of taking some idea and then adding Ethereum to it, and kind of getting that aura of interest, whether from investors or from speculators or um, people that are just kind of like looking for new crypto projects. And that doesn't seem super sustainable to me. However, it's kind of exactly what's been happening for years. And so I don't know, like people continually try and call the top, right? Like uh, Paris Hilton got into NFTs publicly. I don't know, like I feel like she was involved for a long time, but then more recently started becoming more vocal about it, and people were like, "Oh, is this Paris Hilton is in NFTs? Is this the top?" And so people are continually looking for like, what's the most absurd thing, and is that the top? And it keeps getting more and more absurd with kind of no end in sight. Um, and so I'm not, I would find it very hard to kind of speculate about the community or the like the NFT market as a whole, or just like the total crypto market as a whole, because um, I think if you look at Tether and like that whole kind of like people have kind of tried to say it's a house of cards. Um, I feel like, was it a house of cards, and now they've replaced some of the cards with something more substantial? I have no idea, but there are still lots of conspiracy theories about it, and like, what would a run on Tether do to the wider crypto market, for example? Um, like you
What
did
is
see
Tether?
Tether is an early stable coin, so pegged to USD, that exchanges use primarily. Um, and There's been a lot of issues about, one, their bank dropped them early on, and they took them a long time to find another bank. There's been a lot of issues with them proving that they have reserves to be able to back up the tether they're printing. They also print a lot of tether. Like just the other day, they printed $1 billion in tether, and it's not entirely clear um, how the average user is going to be affected if tether breaks its peg. Like, is all of crypto going to be affected? Are the exchanges going to be affected? But I mean, if people want to go down that rabbit hole, there are a lot of great YouTube videos. Like if you search tether conspiracy, like you'll have a field day if that's your thing. Um, but like that, like it's something that had seemed to start off like people were like, "There's no way this is like a total conspiracy. Like they have no reserves." And as time's gone by, they've seemed to get more legit. Maybe I don't know. I don't know if I would call them legit yet, but like they seem to have gone in the more legit direction in terms of like they've been scrambling this whole time trying to make it real. And now like the conspiracy theories have died down somewhat. They went through a New York attorney general probe, and they didn't come out like sparkling, but I think they came out of that better than people assumed they would. Um,
It wasn't as bad as people thought, so
yeah, yeah,
it's a win for us. We'll take it.
right, right, yeah, yeah,
What would make
um,
something legit in the crypto world? I mean, just it's so volatile.
yeah,
For
yeah.
me,
I
you
mean,
have to have the government backing to it, and what's the incentive for the government to back it?
yeah. So like USDC is maybe one of the most legit things, the Coinbase run stablecoin, um, because it's people can easily understand what it is, right? It represents US dollars. It is backed by one of the largest companies in crypto, Coinbase, and somebody will have to fact check all this because this is just
Yeah,
understanding, but like that has the kind of seal of legitimacy for those reasons, right? Like it's easy to understand. The implementation seems good. It's got the backing of a large company, and then you have things like who do I want to pick on? Um,
Elon, man of the
um,
year,
yeah, right, right.
person of the
Yeah,
year.
he's kind of like changed course on crypto a bunch of times. Um, and his tweets do kind of move markets, which is interesting. Um, because people want to
But
either
there's a
go
lot
ahead.
of people who are big money people who are backing the NFTs and the crypto, like a Gary V, like Mark Cuban, like Elon. I mean, they're so
Yeah,
heavily invested in it. It's kind of hard to separate, whether or not that's going to be the legitimacy of it, because there's so many people who follow them regardless of what they say. Whatever they say, I'm in, and I'm gonna rock.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You have this kind of hive mind mentality, which like uh, a lot of kind of people who are trading exploit that because they're like, okay, if I get in early on this and then I build enough interest, then I can sell to the newcomers, or I don't- you know that's kind of a I think people sometimes do believe like, hey, I can get my friends into this and we can all profit, or it's not always kind of just like one person out for themselves.
Yeah, it
Um,
has like the MLM feel to it. Also, when you get in at the
yeah, yeah,
beginning,
yeah,
it's going to be great because you got, I talked to someone I forget where it is. It might be in Colombia. There's a housing. It's all crypto. It's all bought
mm,
in crypto, and it's by these young people who made money early on, and they're buying these condos in crypto, which is an interesting thing to buy product with
yeah,
crypto because it's
yeah.
twice as much tomorrow. So
Yeah, yeah,
people who
huge
are
opportunity cost
people who are
potentially.
in early, they don't care necessarily to say, look, it cost me very little to accumulate this,
Yeah,
and so that's for me getting in early MLM type feel.
yeah,
Um, and I hate to sound negative on it. It could be just something I don't understand. There's a lot of things out there. I don't play a whole lot in the stock market. There's a lot of things out there that people can do very well in financially that
hmm,
I don't take a part in, and I say, "Oh, good for you." I think it's great that people can do that. Where I don't want to see is, and but Gary Vee says, "Well, don't spend the money if you don't have it." That's like the gambling sites putting a
yeah,
thing up there, don't gamble,
right,
right? I
right,
mean,
yeah,
if you say it just so you say it, but yet
yeah,
then you go ahead and, you start your bidding at $10,000 for
right,
something that who has no idea what it's going to be worth tomorrow. Only if someone else
yep,
wants to pay more than you just paid for it.
yeah,
It's tough. And I would love to talk to people who are really excited about it, but understand, why are you excited about it? Is it because you got in the right moment and have the right
yeah,
NFTs that have made you money?
yeah,
Where do you go from there?
yeah, yeah. And I feel like a lot of the whales we see are like very early Ethereum holders or Bitcoin holders who have like they've profited so much, it's basically just funny money to them. And when you have that much funding available to you, you can move markets just by your trades, and so there is a lot of that rich get richer by virtue of being able to um, influence the early direction of a project and receive kind of early access as a result. So like there's a ton of insider trading that happens. There's a ton of like self-dealing that happens, or kind of like painting the tape. There's a ton of like right now people are doing tax loss harvesting. So like anything they have that they don't necessarily want to keep long term that they've lost a ton of money on, they're like selling it for, pennies on the dollar, and just harvesting the tax loss so that they can pay fewer taxes. I mean, that actually is interesting to me because I think a lot of people's approach to crypto taxes is just to kind of go, I don't know. And we will see. I think some regulation got passed that doesn't go into effect this year, but next year or the year after, whereby exchanges are going to have to report transactions larger than a given size, which is going to have tax implications for people. And so yeah, the tax side, like if people want to build in crypto, like the tax side is probably something that we'll see a lot of growth in terms of product opportunities, and which is like good and bad, I guess. Like it's gonna annoy a ton of people, but it does add to that legitimacy. So
Yeah, it needs to be regulated. I mean, it's
yeah,
otherwise it's just the wild, wild west, which a lot of this stuff sort of is the wild, wild, wild west. But it's
yeah,
been
it's very much the
that
Wild
way
Wild
for a
West.
while.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
every time new companies introduce and hop on this, which is we're seeing this every week,
Yeah.
some big company with a lot of influence, which I think is really the big important thing, the influence that these companies have,
Yeah.
no matter what they put out, is going to be something that people buy.
Yeah. 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 I mean the technical underpinnings of Ethereum make it really easy to shoot yourself in the foot and lose a lot of money as somebody building in the space. Like you see these large projects lose like hundreds of millions of dollars. Seems like every week. And there are people who keep track of like which projects have suffered these losses. One of them is called Rekt, REKT. And if you kind of scroll, they have a leaderboard, right, of like what project has lost the most millions of dollars because of a because of exploits. And the language that Ethereum contracts are written in is it's not as kind of battle hardened as languages that other people are using just by virtue of fewer people using it. Um, sorry, fewer people writing code in it. The tooling is worse off. As a language, I don't like it because it's just way too easy to shoot yourself in the foot, and potentially leave exploits in your code. And so, like the kind of forensic analysis I've done is around looking for exploits in these contracts, and kind of figuring out because I love detective work, and that's a way to find things that has like direct monetary impact, right? Like if you find the exploit that allows you access to $50 million in funds, like that is like that pays off pretty quickly, right? Because the the norm now is less because people have like just like they find an exploit, they take all of the money, and what happens is that the exchanges will block that address from interacting with them, and so people are stuck with $100 million worth of Ethereum that they can't ever move into USD because the exchanges have blocked them. And so I'm sure there are creative ways that they can spend that money, but there are kind of not safeguards, but there are some small mitigations against spending those funds. So what people are doing now is saying like, yeah, I took this $100 million. I'm going to give you $99 million back, and I'm going to take this 1% as my exploit finder's fee. And the response to that has been like ecstatic because
Yeah, they
um,
get it back.
they get it back, right? Like that's all these people care about is like, oh man, like this was a bad exploit, but we at least we were like 99% whole. And so I think the kind of exploit finders are like, yeah, I mean, $1 million I could spend is better than $100 million I can't spend. So there's that kind of shift in the mindset. There are still people who just take it all though. There was like $135 million exploit last week. I forget the project name, but yeah, it definitely still happens. Um,
So how do you know
yeah,
what's
and
real and what's not?
that I mean that is I kind of the way I talk to people about it is that every Solidity contract, Solidity is the language that Ethereum contracts are built in. Every contract is its own bug bounty, right? If you have millions of dollars sitting in that contract, you can assume that people are trying to figure out how to take that money. The longer that money sits there without someone taking it, uh, is an indication that there is no exploit available. Um, so some of it is like, though, like on the flip side, um, we've seen exploits that sat there for years and nobody had bothered to look. And when they did look, or when some new technique became available, you see that this thing that people assumed was safe was not safe and got their funds taken. So there's a lot of kind of buyer beware in crypto. There's a lot of things that people just don't understand because they're like programming concepts and not necessarily um, uh, like they maybe don't make sense to the average user. So like when you're transacting with things, oftentimes you're giving that contract access to the assets in your wallet, which um, that access goes on long after you've forgotten about it. And so there are tools that kind of show you who still has access and allows you to revoke that access, which is annoying because it costs gas to revoke that access. And so often people won't do it for that reason. But if that contract ever gets exploited, like your funds are at risk for that reason. So it is like I can't stress enough how much of the Wild West it still is.
Are
Because
the big companies getting scammed?
That's a good question. I haven't heard like I mean it'll be news if you know Pepsi's project gets scammed or Nike's project gets scammed. There was a scandal with the Nike artifact thing with insider trading because I guess a lot of people knew about the acquisition and traded on it. It was like a kind of it was like a public secret because you can go back and find like public tweets where people are talking about like, oh, you should load up and then like 10 days later the Nike thing happened. So it's like people it leaked and people knew about it, but not everybody knew about it, and some people profited. So like that stuff has definitely happened. I don't know if there's been an equivalent like multi-million dollar exploit on any of like the big company stuff yet. But they like they have the workforce and the backing to find the few competent developers out there. So it's not a guarantee that they won't be exploited, but at least they're starting from a kind of a different playing field.
Yeah.
They can afford the talent who is building with those exploits in mind.
The other thing that's going kind of crazy right now is the metaverse. Obviously,
Yeah,
well, it kind of ties in for me, like the Fortnites of the world,
mm,
where people were buying clothing to dress because they want. So that's
yeah,
sort of the whole digital world, and I see value. I see value in owning something like that if you're in a world like a Second Life or a Fortnite.
yeah,
That's the world you're living in, as you said, the escapism of it, being able to just
yeah,
kind of dive in and be about it, which is different than just owning a pair of sneakers that's on
yeah,
your phone in the
yeah,
digital sense of digital, because there's wallets like even in the NFT ticketing world. I mean, we have digital tickets. You put it in a wallet. I can go into a wallet. So why is an NFT ticket now better than? It's just maybe they made it nicer looking. And
Hmm.
like, why do I care if I could say I own this?
Yeah.
Why do people
Yeah,
care?
yeah, like the tickets kind of they don't make a ton of sense to me, right? Because um like I guess if you think people are going to speculate in tickets, then it makes sense to be able to let people like buy and sell those tickets after the fact. But like just putting them on Ethereum, I don't see a ton of benefit. But then again, I'm also the person that doesn't see a ton of benefit to putting many things on Ethereum. I think many things would just be served by a regular database because it's way easier. um, I mean, Ethereum is great if you want to allow people to speculate. Um, and I think a lot of people do see a boost because they're like, okay, yeah, if we let the speculators in, our daily active users numbers are going to go up. And so like it's this like aura of crypto. So a lot of people are kind of getting into it for that reason. Um, there are also lots of people who are trying to do like an end run around regulation. So like one of the projects um, that I looked into kind of forensically was Augur, which is prediction markets. Um, they've kind of struggled to get things off the ground for a long time, um, but they their big thing was like censorship resistance. So they exist as contracts on Ethereum. And as such, like you can transact with them from anywhere, from any country. Now, they also serve a UI over the regular internet, over the web. And that UI, um, they don't serve it in the US because of gambling regulation. Um, and you can still get it over Tor though, but they can't really. It's like you have to ask somebody um, about how to like, oh, how do I do this? I'm in the U.S. and somebody will tell you, but they kind of built it so that there's no like off button, right? The U.S. can't be like you have to turn off this ability. They can't because it's a contract on Ethereum. We haven't necessarily seen like a legal like somebody being legally compelled to change something on chain, which would be an interesting whenever that case happens. It'll be super interesting to track the outcome. But Augur, for their part, is like, we don't serve our UI in the US, but there are alternate UIs available. You can kind of bypass that restriction with Tor or however else. Um, or it might not be Tor, it might be IPFS, but basically some way where you can still get that web UI served to you so that you can interact with the project. So yeah, there's that element of uh, it exists outside of this like the libertarian idea of like countries shouldn't matter, borders shouldn't matter. Like it's all you can do whatever you want. It's like a free zone.
It's like, the Chicago guns. Like, okay, I can't get it here. I'll just go into the neighboring city and
Mm,
have
mm,
buy liquor, right? The liquor store that's right across the border, but it's 5 minutes away from you, and you can
yeah,
buy the liquor there. It's
yeah,
there's always the workaround, and people trying to figure out how it's kind of like a gray area, which in a sense is, if you're looking for that, kind of could be conceived as a little bit shady.
yeah,
Just by nature of you're trying to find the gray area and things.
yeah.
Um, you know, but maybe there's a reason why it's that way. I don't know. It is interesting to see, because you don't have a lot of information. That's the other thing. There's not a lot of information. Where do you find? You do a lot of research. Where do you find your information mostly?
Yeah, I mean, I think the best thing you can do is look at the contracts themselves, which are not always public, and so you have to decompile them, which is its own skill. And then reading those decompiled contracts is a something you have to learn as well. But that's like the source of truth. Um, and then you can get really fancy and you can simulate transactions against those contracts. And if you're looking for an exploit, that's what you do, is you kind of see how that contract reacts under specific circumstances and see if it's exploitable. So like the what a project says publicly does not always match up with what's in their contract. And it's those discrepancies that are really interesting to me, because the contract is the law. If you can do something via the contract that the project says that should be impossible, then the person telling you it's impossible is the wrong one, because the contract is the contract. It is the kind of sole arbiter of what's true.
But isn't it possible to put something in a contract that's not true or possible?
Um, I'm not sure what you mean. It's certainly possible to put something into the contract that was unintended.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've seen that many times. Um, and There was a project recently. God, they had a couple of different exploits. What was the? Oh, so like there's this. I'll get technical for a second, but I'll try to keep it brief. Um, all these NFT projects launch via what's called minting, um, and so you come up with your new project. You're gonna sell 5,000 of these things. You pick a time to like do this launch, and you let people pay some Ethereum, and they get an NFT, and the NFT attributes are kind of generated randomly from this pool of 5,000, and that process is called minting. And there are oftentimes there's like a pre-sale list you can get on if you hang out in this project's Discord, and you jump through some hoops. Often they want you to do some marketing, like tweet about the project, tag some friends, yada yada yada. And then you get on the pre-sale list, and there's some logic to say like, oh yeah, if you're on the pre-sale list, if your wallet is in the list of accepted wallets, then you can mint two of whatever this project is, and that logic is handled on the contract. One of these projects I saw recently, their logic was they checked how many you had in your wallet, and not how many you had minted, which is a great loophole, because you can mint your two in the pre-sale, move them out of your wallet, mint another two, move those out of your wallet, mint another two. You could just do that ad infinitum. And so what most projects do is they keep track of how many a wallet has minted. So like you mint two, it increments your number in their contract by two, and regardless of whether you move them out of your wallet or not, that number is still two. So they only let you mint two. Versus this was a nice little loophole I found. Told the project in question they opted not to fix it, and because they didn't think many people were going to find this exploit. And two, they were kind of like, well, we'll keep track of people who exploit it and just manually remove them from the whitelist after they get in their like little bit extra. So they're like, we don't care if people do this twice if they get 4 instead of 2, but we'll notice and we'll manually remove them from the pre-sale list after that. Which is kind of, I mean, it's like a cheesy fix, but it didn't require them to like have their developers work on the weekend and like redeploy a contract and yada yada yada. But it's just like there's like on the face of it, like if you're looking at that code, you're like, this makes sense. But if you are looking at it from an adversarial mindset of like, how could I exploit this? You're like, oh, like this is like the cheesiest code. It's just like a hole a mile wide that you could drive through. So there are many people incentivized to look for those holes. I'm honestly surprised that more people didn't exploit this specific contract, because it had some buzz, and I assumed people would be kind of looking for that stuff. But I think like 3 or 4 people noticed, maybe by accident, because like there were people who bought their 2, immediately sold them, and then realized, oh, like it's letting me buy more now. But maybe
Right.
didn't realize in advance of that by looking at the contract like I did.
Yeah, it's like if it says you can only buy 2, but it lets you buy 4.
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
by chance, you're like, oh, I didn't know I could do that, and then
yeah.
have it. So you've actually gone to some companies and tell them some of the stuff that you fought, and you get a little some indifference on back, correct?
Oh yeah, a lot of indifference. You like I get why people are kind of using these exploits themselves, because if you go to a there's if you go to a company, there's not really a guarantee that you're going to get somebody at the company on the phone who is um, maybe honest or in a position to um, uh, fix whatever the issue is, right? So if you get somebody on the phone and they're kind of unscrupulous, and you're like, here's an exploit that allows somebody to take the $100 million you have in your contract, like the person you get on the phone might say, great. How do I like? What's the exploit? We'll get that fixed right away. Um, versus if you take the $100 million, then you're gonna get everybody in that project on the phone, and you can say like, okay, cool. Here, let's come up with a plan to get this $100 million back to you, or the whatever it is minus my exploit fee, or the fee for my time in terms of like. They speak about it in like protecting your funds or whatever, because if they didn't exploit it, somebody else could. um, and so there's that idea of like the white hat hacker or the gray hat hacker versus the black hat hacker. The white hat is looking for things so that they can warn people or get them fixed. The black hat is looking for things so they can exploit them for their own gain. And the
Yeah.
gray hat is somewhere in the middle, right? They're trying to make some money, but they're also trying to get things fixed.
And you want to make it better.
Yeah, like I have certainly not done the approach where I just like take my fee carte blanche. The things I found, I've told people about.
Yeah. So you do own a few NFTs. Let's talk about Zed for a minute. That's something that interested you. I had a friend who was all about it once he heard about it and was. But what can you tell us about Zed and
Yeah.
why it interests you?
Zed is so silly. It is horse racing on Polygon. So the climate aspect, or the energy use aspect is lessened, but not entirely removed from the equation. And there's a friend in the poker group who started talking about it, and so I had to. One of it was like they like it's so silly. I have to find more. And from there was just a rabbit hole of kind of looking at like, okay, I got to see how these contracts work, because if you're doing horse racing, right, on a blockchain like Ethereum, where does the racing happen? Does it happen on chain, in which case there's probably some exploitable randomness, or does it happen off chain, in which case like that's weird because um, often in crypto projects, people don't tolerate things happening off chain. They do in Zed for whatever reason.
Hmm.
And I think if, given the current technology, it probably makes sense for Zed to have the racing off chain. Um, because like to do it on chain, I think it's probably exploitable. And I think it probably gives people too much information about the performance of their horses if they store all that stuff on chain. We're getting to the point where you can do these like what are called zero knowledge proofs, where you can store some of that stuff on chain in um, opaque fashion. And then at least it's reproducible. And you can say, oh, I know that they haven't messed with how the races are done because nothing has changed on the contract or on the attributes of my horse. Whereas now, there was a big brouhaha because I was looking at the racing data and noticed a big change on August 23rd. And there were lots of people who were kind of pinging me about it, but eventually took that to Zed, and they were able to kind of they owned up to it, which they normally don't. So it was compelling enough that they had to own up to it. So people were a bit. It was good and bad outcome because they changed things, but they owned up to it, and then
How
they
big?
said,
I mean, it had a lot of popularity at the beginning. Has it tapered off a little bit with Zed, or are they still,
mm,
getting the interest?
they're it's kind of flat right now. It's kind of flat. They've done all sorts of things to drum up interest, and this kind like the NFT segment is like so everybody in there is looking for a quick buck. So like a lot of people got into Zed because they were looking for a quick buck, and now they're on to the next thing looking for a quick buck. So like people jump projects, like people who were like heavy into Zed and were like big community members and whatnot. Um, they were um, they've just like they're gone now because they want something else that they can get in on the ground floor of, and maybe have that that 100x return or whatever they're looking for.
And that's just
So
they sell everything and move on.
yeah, yeah. A lot of people liquidating. Some people just they're like, no, I'll hold them, but I'm on to the next thing, so I'm not going to participate anymore. Just kind of hoping that their horses are worth something more at some point. Um, but yeah, a lot of speculation. But it is Zed is kind of one of this is an example of this idea of play to earn, which like Axes is another example. And I'm it's weird because like crypto uh, really enables the financialization of everything, and which is not entirely new, right? Like people like in Ultima Online, in Eve Online, have been like grinding out in-game currency that they sell for real-world currency for a long time, and I think the part of crypto that's weird to me is like that's built in from the beginning. Like that's the kind of be all end all is like, yeah, you can kind of um, race your horses, but the idea is like you want to make money from it. You're not doing it necessarily because it's fun. You're doing it because of the rush and because there's the opportunity to make money. And it's even weirder for something like Axes, which has this like very cutesy exterior, and it's all about money. And Axes has like there's I don't know if, I hope somebody makes a documentary about how it all works. But they have these like people are paying like groups of people out of the country to basically play the game for them. And like scholars they call them. If you Google like Axes scholars, you'll probably find some descriptions of how it all works. But yeah, it's bizarre because people are like surviving based on playing this silly blockchain game. And it's just yeah, it's a weird world, and in many ways it's a bad world, but it's an interesting world, and like that's why I pay attention to it. And yeah, it's been captivating. It's also a thing where like um, I'm like I've said a few times, I'm like not positive on it. There's been a lot of cheesy shit created. There's a lot of scamming, a lot of grifting. Have met some interesting developers along the way, and the consensus seems to be like, yeah, people have no idea what they're doing, and so have met some interesting people within the larger community, and got to do some fun detective work. Um, and I guess help out some projects by telling them their shit is broken.
I
But
wonder, did you ever think about doing it in the same way, like Catch Me If You Can, Frank Abagnale, when worked for, someone who can find this stuff like this? Is that something that interests you down the line?
No, I mean, I think the detective work, like I'm on the other side of that, right? Like I'm looking for the people who are cutting and running or who are exploiting things. Like the de-anonymization aspect. I'm certainly kind of like the detective in that scenario, which is like that's fun for me. It's like debugging a really hard bug when you're programming or something is what I
Just
would
a hobby
liken it
for
to.
now. Just a hobby.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You have a
Yeah, yeah.
little amount of knowledge for this type of hobby, which is, that's what makes it
Yeah,
interesting.
like ADD just means like whatever is interesting, I just go really deep on. And
Well,
for whatever reason, this has been fairly captivating.
yeah, it's been a lot of good information. I still don't know a whole lot about it. I think a lot of people don't. So the more people can get educated about it, could be, I think the better if it's going to be something that sticks around or to prevent people from putting all their eggs in something that is not
Yeah.
going to be fruitful for them, even though other people can be. So there's plenty of things out there that people do very well in, but not the majority of people.
Yeah.
Maybe even
Yeah.
playing the lottery. Someone wins the lottery, but
Yeah. Yeah.
people lose a lot of money every week on it. So we'll let you out of here in the same way we let everyone out of the Wolff Den. You could spend a day with anyone in the world. They have to be alive, and you can't be related to them. Who would you pick, and what would you like to do?
Oh my God. Man, you're gonna shoot. I don't even know how I'd pick because ideally, um, I'd pick one of my favorite authors, but a lot of them are dead. Uh, maybe a day with William Gibson, who wrote Neuromancer and coined the term cyberspace, and he's very much alive. Yeah, I'd love to. I mean, I would just want to pick his brain, or like hang out and just be like, "Yo, like, let's just talk about the world at large." And what's your take on how the stuff you've written about has become real in various ways?
Yeah,
So
people who are ahead of their time, and it's that's always something, and it always makes for an interesting conversation. Well, I really appreciate
yeah,
your time here. Look forward to talking to you more about this down the road as things get a little bit more clear, or a little bit more muddier. Who knows?
right on.
It could go
Yep.
either
Thanks for
way.
having me on.
So appreciate the time. Have a great day, and
You
we
too.
got another episode tomorrow. Tune into the Wolff Den. Everyone, stay well. See you tomorrow.